Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiffany Dell, and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. We look back on the weekend with just two mainstream racing fixtures, but also two devoted fan favourites. I bet you can guess what at least one of them is. We go to the glorious Mugello circuit for MotoGP, to somewhat scruffy the streets of Detroit. They looked a little bit on the tired side for IndyCar and IMSA. World Rally concentrated on in Sardinia. That was amazing. Actually, the World Rally, I'm a big fan nowadays, Tiff. And there were the devoted fans in their droves. They headed to either their meccas, which were the Nurburgring for the N24, or the Isle of Man, the TT, where history was kind of made, I guess.
Yeah.
It's some race, that one. There was
closer.
NASCAR. There was NASCAR, of course.
NASCAR.
But first of all, we're going to take you to what we did last week, which was golf.
Yes, let's talk golf. Let's talk golf.
And why are we talking golf?
Apart from that great win last night for McIntyre. McIntyre was amazing with his dad on the back in America's first. So I follow golf. We play golf. Well, we try to play golf, don't we, Paul? And it was the British Racing Drivers Club annual golf tournament at the RAC Club down near wherever we were, near Epsom. And we were lucky, weren't we? I invited you as my guest, which I thought was probably an unwise thing to do, especially when you turned up in shorts. But, you know, not everyone can get their dress sense right for these big occasions. You know, that's more live, you know, that breakaway. They wear shorts, you know, when it's proper golf. And we were so lucky to have along with us this young 16-year-old Freddie Slater, who's
15-year-old. He's not even 16 yet. Incredible what he's achieved.
15. Who is being talked about as the next big thing. He's the next Ollie Bearman. He's with the Prema team, which of course he's won all the karting and cartio. He's a lovely lad. We really enjoyed his company.
I gotta say, he was. I cannot believe he's 15 because my son is 13. Oliver, you know, grunts quite a lot. A bit of a Kevin and Perry. This Freddie Slater was Fred Slater, as he likes to be called. He was incredibly mature, an absolute pleasure to be with. He was quite a tasty golfer as well, and I was absolutely awful. It was like I've never played before.
However, like your shorts let the team down, Freddie's handicap was a bit sus because he ended up winning the competition with 42 points. If any of you people know about golf, on a 20, what handicap did he claim? 23, 24 handicap. So he had about 6 shots, 6 twin holes. So
well, I told you because I haven't played for some time. I told you I said you better put me down as 18. And I'm driving there thinking, God, I should have said 14 or 12 or something. What if I win this? It's going to be really embarrassing. Reality was, I couldn't hit a cow's ass with a banjo, as they say.
Fast Freddie. I would love it. He's one of our BRDC rising stars or superstars. We have this sort of, helping youngsters through that do well in the British club. So he's not a club member yet. They're just these juniors. And of course, the main trophy was for the club member who scored best, which was Will Stevens, who, of course, fresh from winning a world sports car race in his Porsche at Spa. So it was great to see. It was great. It was a good day out. Great club. And of course, Freddie had just come from winning all the first 3 rounds of the Italian Formula 4 Championship. He's concentrating on this year. He won all 3 rounds at Misano. And the day after the golf, he flew out to Imola this weekend, but didn't have such a good weekend. He actually won the first race, which made it 4 on the trot.
4 in a row, yeah.
But then the scrutineers found some sort of little inconsistency with his front wing setup. And of course, this is what all these teams are looking like. Prema, these weird, you know, the most knowledgeable team. They're all in this grey area of trying to find a little tweak. It would appear that the little tweak wasn't quite, according to the organisers, illegal. So he lost that win, which would have been 4 on the trot. He crashed in the second race, but came through to win the final race. So he's now won 4 out of 6. So we hope he goes. We wish him well.
And we always say Prema, but interesting, Fred, who races for the team, says Prima. So maybe we should change to Prima. But he's going to be a star of the future. Hopefully he's going to remember us and invite us to his big celebrity golf days when he's very famous and successful.
But in Formula One, very little gossip. They're all heading off to Canada, of course, this week. And it's just there's no really end to the Perez saga. Everyone's saying, he's got his contract. Therefore, all the excitement of someone going to Red Bull seemed to be over. You know, with everyone signing elsewhere.
I can shed a little bit of light onto this, a little bit of gossip, because I was at Pirelli lunch last week, and a little bit of gossip there from some people. I'm not going to say who, but it's all about, and as people, I guess it's no secret, it's all about the money that he brings in. And apparently the amount of money that Red Bull make from Mexico is just so enormous that they need that. But I said, what about, what's the Indy guy? Alex Palou.
Alex
Palou. What about him? Swap him over with him, give him a chance. But I guess he's McLaren's, but so maybe it wouldn't work. But so they reckon it's all about the merchandise and the marketing and the sponsorship and how much he sells in Mexico. But you wouldn't think it was that big a market, really, would you?
But his crash at Monaco, which I still think was partly his fault as much, apparently cost £3 million worth of damage. That's what they said, 3 million. So he keeps on hitting things. He's not going to make it a profit. Now, Alexander Albon, because he signed for Williams, I think he was told no Red Bull for me. I think Carlos has probably been told no Red Bull for him. So I don't know quite what's going on there. And of course, Yuki Tsunoda has apparently signed up for RB because he's almost been told, no Red Bull for you either, which is all a bit of a shame as far as I'm concerned. And now they're saying that Sainz, I think Eddie Jordan was saying, don't go to Audi because Audi won't have a competitive car for 3 years if they're lucky, building their own engine, their own car. So some people are saying, go to Williams for a year. This is the growing story. You might pop down to Williams just for a year and see, what develops, because of course it's the new formula in 2026. So interesting. So it's still a story. The other big story, of course, was Esteban Ocon, who went to the press and said he was hurt by the comments being made about me. Now, this is a driver who has clashed with his teammates ever since he started Formula One. You remember the famous Pink Panthers, him and Perez, banging wheels every weekend? And, of course, you're usually quite close to your teammate on the grid because you've got the same car. But he sounded like a little quiet flower. He was upset that people had said he's driving badly. He was hurt.
It's a long thread on Twitter or X, whatever it's called these days. But it was a long thread, and I really don't appreciate it, and it's very nasty, and I was very deeply hurt. Oh, get over it! You paid me £100,000 a week or £1 million a month, whatever they're on. You can call me what you want. You call me what you want anyway, and I don't know anybody.
And we all know he drove like a dick, So I mean, oh dear. But I mean, there was some of the stories, after it happened, of him being fined by Alpine or punished by Alpine, and we're all growing to hope, but I don't think it's going to happen now, that Jack Doohan, they'd take him out for a weekend. That's the best punishment. You can't fine these boys because they've got so much money anyway. Yeah. But I think it'd be really good to see Jack Doohan, their reserve driver, who's did so well in Formula 2 last couple of years. That would be a breath of fresh air to the sport. That's great stories, like Ollie Behrman doing that Ferrari. I mean, what a great headline that got around the world, But no, they all got their heads stuck.
Could get Fred Slater in there.
Yeah. Ocon's, he's been in Formula One now for nearly 10 years. It's incredibly seat blockers. 10 years he's been bashing his way into his teammates, and then he gets upset. Anyway.
He's not,
apart from that, there's no other real golf or golf related or Formula One related gossip.
Ocon's certainly not the neutral's favourite, but I met him very briefly. He did some Renault Alpine thing, and he was so pleasant, so nice, and gave
charming
time.
Frenchman.
He was, but then he comes across as being not nice and pleasant, doesn't he? Especially on track. Okay, where are we heading first?
Against his friend. Well, I think the main event was for cars. We always read cars first because that's mine. Maybe MotoGP should have headlined, but the big headline really was the Detroit weekend around a very weird street track, very bumpy, lots of 90-degree, American city corners, one huge long straight into a hairpin. And of course, they were all clattering into each other non-stop. So it became a bit farcical, and it wasn't that scenic. But to my mind, as a driver's circuit, it was pretty epic. There were some amazing moments and drives and overtakes. And it began with the sports cars going, these huge Le Mans prototypes, they're called GTPs in America when they race. It was a short field. There were 10 of those. There were 11 GTs. They didn't allow the amateurs in, so it was the GT Pro boys. Only a 20-car field, but just so spectacular to watch those big sports cars being hurled around those narrow corners and the guys brushing walls and really on the case. Nick Tandy was perhaps the star of the day. Britain's Nick Tandy put on pole position his Porsche 963.
Did I mention I've raced in the same race as Nick Tandy? Have I ever mentioned that?
Might have done. Maybe just whispered it. But he led all the way until he overtaken back marks. Amazingly, around those tight corners, they were pointing out that the GTs are as quick as those huge prototypes, simply because they're nimble. Going between the thing, they've got a lot of grip. So in fact, they couldn't sort of overtake them on all the twiddly bits. They had to wait for the big straights. There's about 2 straights or 3, or 2.5. And he just outbraked himself coming in behind a GT car at the hairpin and clattered this Porsche off. So he was one of many the whole weekend to get these avoidable contact drive-through. It's great, it's simple. They don't have 5 seconds or 10 seconds in IMSA or America. That's a drive-through penalty. So that dropped him down the path. But he got lucky later on. They had another yellow just as he came into the pits for tyres, because they closed the pits when they pull the yellows out. And his co-driver, the French guy, where's his name now? Mathieu Jaminet, was leading almost until the end. But it was a really good pass by, where's the one now? What are his names? Ricky Taylor took the lead, his Acura, by overtaking Jaminet and dumped them down to second with Nick Tandy. And a Cadillac came third. So it was Acura, Porsche, Cadillac. The GT racing, great news for them. Sebastian Seb Priaulx, son of Andy Priaulx, the World Touring Car Champion. He shared the winning Porsche with Lauren Heinrich. So we had a win for Britain. We had second place British drivers, Jack Hawksworth and Ben Barnicoat in the Lexus. With Aston Martin came third. So great GT racing on the Saturday to open up the weekend. Then on Sunday morning, we had the Indy NXT, where our British driver, Louis Foster, that was so quick and I thought would be really up the front all year, had a really unlucky start to the season, but he dominated from pole. He was chased home, in fact, not by the American Abel and Cole, or whatever their names are, Abel and Siegel, that have been leading the championship, by Brazilian Chao Colette, who he had a few wins in Formula 3. He's come over to America to try and further his career. Well, he had 3 wins in Formula 3 when he looks on his CV and Wikipedia. But of course, I always checked, was that a feature race or a reverse? And all 3 of his wins are reverse grid. So he hasn't actually won a Formula 3 race in my book. And Jamie Chadwick getting ever better, qualified 4th and was running 4th, 5th, 4th, having a really good race. And then she got a bit tangled with someone that cut her tyre, had a puncture. And she ended up wherever she ended up.
She'll get a bit of luck. She will get some luck. If you keep running there, you will get some luck.
Well, she's had a podium already now. She's still not quick enough to win. She's not quite. She's still that half a second off the front 3 or 4. But so yeah, had a good weekend. Getting ever better. Good. And of course, about 2 or 3 yellows. So poor old Louis Foster had about 3 restarts, which is all part of American racing. You've got to do your restarts. You expect full course yellows. But then we came to the big IndyCar boys, about 29 of them trying to get around this 1.5 mile, 1 3/4 mile track.
So tiny, wasn't it?
Well, it was almost a farce. It got close to being farce. A lot of Twitter saying, "Oh, this is silly," but it was entertaining. And yes, they kept, because the yellows are such long, drawn-out things where they get everybody back in the right order. They keep the pit lane closed until they've done 3 laps behind the yellow, and they all come in and change things. So I know what people mean, but I mean, it was just the driving, the catch, one car. So I always said, if one car going round a corner excites you, it's a good formula. And all those boys, cracking opposite lock, touching walls. Santino Ferrucci continued his trying to get a bit disliked by the entire world by banging into a couple of fellow Americans. And in the race, he got to Castro Neves, he T-boned or picked up the backside. So many stories that I can't catch up with them all. But I just thought it was spectacular when they were running, and it was a scruffy looking course. But I mean, the concentration to keep it away from the walls, bumping through S's, dabs of opposite lock. And that's what I just like to watch.
I agree. It looks spectacular. And it's nice to see the drivers working so hard. Yeah. When you see them and inches away, centimetres away from the wall.
Diving up the inside, locking up, running wide. And there are actually 8. I thought there were more than 8 cautions. There are only actually 8 full course yellows. And they ran for 47 of the 100 laps behind the pace car, so almost half the race. And yes, that sort of spoilt it a bit, and it looked a bit embarrassing. But once they got going again, they started hitting each other again. But the wily Scott Dixon, yet again, Scott Dixon, this Kiwi veteran who's now chasing the most championships and the most wins, saved his fuel, did this trick they do. They work out the last possible lap they can dump into the pits. And just coasted around virtually to hold on to win. As Marcus Ericsson, of course, had a terrible Indianapolis, Indy 500 reigning winner, started at the back of the grid and crashed out. He had a really good bounce back to finish second. He had loads of fuel, so he was catching Dixon at the end. And actually took second place off Marcus Armstrong, who was having a really good weekend, another Kiwi, who was following Dixon's same team. So he was trying to do the same fuel trick as Dixon, but virtually ran out with the lap to go. And had to virtually let Ericsson pass. They actually ran out of the slowing down lap. But he got podium, so he got third place. They had rain, of course, drivers staying out in slicks, not in slicks, and they put the wets on, had to come, and that was all added to the spectacle. One story that came out was Théo Pourchaire, was one of these Formula 2 drivers that should have been in the Sauber instead of Zhao, but Zhao had the money, and Pourchaire, the reserve driver, didn't. So we keep the Chinese man in, which helps the politics of liberty, obviously, and the crowds. But he qualified seventh, the best of the McLaren trio, better than Rossi and the other guy. But he finished 10th in the end, he qualified seventh. So Théo Pourchaire, perhaps a standout of the weekend, and starting a career, as a professional single-seater racing driver. It may not be Formula One, the big pinnacle, but I'm sure he's got a great career ahead of him. But yeah, spectacular.
How old is he? Do you know?
Maybe like 22 or 23, I think. They all start so long. He won Formula 3 and Formula 2, I think, Théo. Well, no, he didn't, actually. I think he was second in Formula 2. But, just spectacular. There was a guy that came back. I wish I'd written his name down. Hadn't raced for about 6 or 7 years. He'd been in sports cars. But, he's got some sponsors and bought a drive and didn't really embarrass himself. What's that name? Can't remember his name. Sorry, name I can't remember. But yeah, so many stories. That's what I mean. There's just so much going on. Instead of 20 drivers driving around doing their fingernails or something, whatever they do at Monaco, changing their makeup.
Very good. He's 20 years old, Théo Pourchaire, youngster.
Théo Pourchaire, French. So yes, maybe partial, but entertaining. That's what we want. But MotoGP, of course, round Mugello. I mean, just looking at the scenery and the crowds and the track and the bikes.
Lovely.
But in fact, it wasn't a fireworks weekend. We've had some amazing races with people coming through, like Marc Marquez coming from 14th up to a podium finish down in Barcelona. It's actually Ducati's test track. It's their home track. It was very much a Ducati-dominated weekend. In fact, in the Grand Prix itself, 7 out of the top 10 were on Ducatis. But of course, there's this big story going on at the moment, because who is going to ride the number 2 Ducati? And this is a big musical chair. This is the works.
This is the works.
Ducati. It's like the Perez thing. So at the moment, leading the championship is Jorge Martin on a satellite Ducati, but he's got a 2024 bike, whereas Marc Marquez on the Gresini satellite has only got a 2023 bike. And they are the 2 riders most desperately wanting to take the second factory Ducati that at the moment is ridden by Enya Bastianini, who hasn't done that well. But all of a sudden, of course, with the pressure on like Perez, although he dropped it in the sprint race, he had a really good race and came second in the Grand Prix. So just like Red Bulls, they had a Ducati 1-2, because Bastianini was unbeatable. Bagnaia was unbeatable. Bastianini, all these names, Italians, nice names, but I keep on mixing them up. Yeah, Bagnaia, who's chasing Martin for the championship, who's had a bad season, won both races easily. Marc Marquez was again in there with his Gresini. After Jorge Martin dropped it in the sprint race, Marquez came second. And who was third in the sprint race? I'll go at third in the sprint race. Must have been, no, it wasn't. I don't even know. Lost it. But Marquez again was chasing like mad on his 2023 bike. He was always in there, but he couldn't beat the factory bikes who came first, second, and third, because Martin was third in the Grand Prix. And the only one changed was Pedro Costa pedaling he's on a satellite KTM, the gas team, or what do they call themselves? Tech 3. And he's on a 2023 KTM. And he was the only one that could really chase the Ducatis, but he faded back. He didn't have the speed around that track. So no real fireworks. And we wait to see who's going to be on the bike next year, because Pedro Costa's now signed for the factory KTM, which means Miller's lost his ride. But both Aprilla and KTM are looking at, Marc Marquez and Jorge Martin. Whoever doesn't get the factory Ducati, can they lure them into their teams? Aprilla or KTM.
I thought
Acosta was Formula 1.
I thought he was very emotional on an interview he did, but actually it was hay fever. It looked like he was crying, but his face.
Yeah, well, the commentators mentioned that. Funny enough, I had terrible hay fever. I've got a bit of a wet nose today. When I was younger racing, and bizarrely, I always remember the only thing that stopped hay fever was adrenaline. And as soon as I started races, I was in the quality, in the collecting area, we were nose pouring all morning. So I was quite surprised when he said that he had tears under his visor. So yeah, I always remember that. And somehow I read a story that adrenaline stops your hay fever.
Speaking of nose, is your nose, because we should tell people about this, but it's cleared up really well. That was a big cut you had on there. Me. It's a BCC, yeah?
Check your spots, check your BCCs.
Yeah.
Oh dear. It wasn't a melamona or one of the proper nasty things. Moto2, again, no real exciting racing, but a great happy story. Joe Roberts, the American that's becoming stronger and stronger this year. He's up to second in the championship now, chasing Spain's Sergio Garcia. He had I think it was pretty much pole to flag win. I don't think he was ever led. And everyone happy to see. An American back in MotoGP is such a good story because, of course, the Americans dominated it, the 70s, 80s, with Australians doing and stuff. It was much more international, whereas now it all seems to be Spanish and Italians. So a good story. Joe Roberts.
I read somewhere, what's the official language of Moto2, MotoGP? And it's Spanglish.
Spanglish.
Spanglish, the official language.
But those Moto2 bikes, again, just watch those bikes around that track. They sound absolutely brilliant. Jake Dixon, I don't know what the story behind it is. He only qualified 15th and finished 12th. So I don't know if he crashed in a test session. I don't know why Jake was back, our only British rider in Moto2. And of course, we only got two riders in Moto3. Scott Ogden, 17th again. Josh Watley, 23rd. But there was, of course, a pack race in the Moto3 boys to entertain. Although the first race, they had a red flag after about 4 laps. And of course, it was a pack of red. Of course, it's David Alonso. He was just like a second quicker on his own throughout practice and everything, this Colombian kid. And in the first start, he pulled them away. Just instead of the guy that was second, you could almost see didn't want to overtake him because he was hoping Alonso would pull him away from the people behind just by sitting behind this kid.
Right.
The red flag came out, nasty crash. But the guy I think he was complaining about back pains and stuff. But I think he's got not anything serious. I haven't read today. So there was a red flag. And the restart, though, the pack stayed with him on the first 2 or 3 laps. So it ended up being a pack of about 6. But he still works it all out. He allows them to overtake and then comes back and just has a head on him of a 16-year-old, however old he is. So David Alonso increases.
How can he ride that well at that age? How can you have that presence of mind and just? Yeah.
The Dutchman Colin Veijer, he was chasing hard. He actually closed up the last lap, but Alonso had done enough to pull away. Interesting, this crash they had was a really nasty crash because one guy. Again, it's curbs. Again, this story we have about track limits, because of course bikes have brought in this green painted piece, and as soon as you touch the green, it's a warning. You touch it again. Of course, with the little single wheels, it's easy to see. But they have introduced they call it the Misano curb or something. So it's a bit rougher. So when you go over the smooth curb, you then hit a nasty rougher curb, which sort of makes you want to get off it. So it deters you. And apparently they've had a lot less of these green marking track limit warnings because the curbs have done the policing. But sadly, if you go over the nasty curb, it's a little bit of a drop. And this Moto3 boy oversteered, or whatever they call it in bike terminology, out and just dropped the rear over this little step. And that just put him into a tank slapper really fast, 120 mile an hour corner or something, almost flat. So he got flung in the air, got hit by a bike following him, and they red flagged after that crash. But even the bikes, it's this whole track limits things, wherever you're racing, unless it's in Detroit where it's just called concrete walls, boy. It's so hard to make a track limit. We don't want 5-second penalties. We don't want that, so you can't visually see who's winning races. You have to wait until the end. And yet, everything you try has got, a safety implication. But hopefully he's on his way to recovering. So nothing really exciting racing, not sensational racing down in Imola, but wonderful joy and enough good racing. With get the name right this time, with Bastianini coming back to second place to take second to make it a factory 1-2.
It was Mugello, not Imola. But by the way,
I've got Freddie Slater was at Imola, so I get carried away with this Italian circuit. Yes, it's certainly not Imola. The one
Mugello's normally very good for bikes, isn't it?
I know. Yeah, usually a bigger pack, but I think because the Ducatis were so strong here, they left the pack behind, and because David Alonso is so strong in Moto3, it pretty much left the pack behind. But still plenty of racing. So that was the main racing. But then, of course, we have these sports which aren't quite racing, but are racing. Because we have the World Rally Championship, which is just a spectacle.
Before you go on to that, and we're going to come on to the TT, but you've said particularly that it's hard because it's not a race, it's against the clock. Chris Harris said about the TT, he was interviewed, this isn't word for word, but the quote was something along the lines of, it was the most spectacular, the most entertaining sport, not just racing, that he's ever watched, being the TT. Now, it's a World Rally Championship.
If you're there, that's a huge difference. That's the thing. Good you're a bank at the Isle of Man or on a rally special stage, you're wowed. I mean, Chris has been over there. He's been tweeting about the last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm sure he's got access to get into the most amazing, exclusive places by the most dangerous corner. And
that's a good point.
Away. But
someone going past at 160, 70 miles an hour.
Yeah.
There was one of Dunlop, and we'll come on to the TT, but just, you're right. So when you're there, because World Rally will look spectacular when you're there as well.
Yeah, so you watch the highlights of the World Rally TV. You see these amazing car control, but as an event, you can't. It's not something you switch on for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon and watch the race or the event. You can't do that with Isle of Man, you can switch Isle of Man on, but it's all staggered. But Elfyn Evans again, another bad. He started the punctures, never on the race. It's now just Hyundai versus Toyota, and they're very close now. So we have got much more exciting. Whereas it was Toyota for the last 3 or 4 years, Hyundai finally sort of got their act together. They're really challenging Toyota. But Sébastien Ogier, having another his part-time weekends, I just turn up and do one more rally for you. He dominated all rally, really. The Hyundais are really close behind him, but then Thierry Neuville had an off and parked in a ditch. But Tanak finally seemed to be getting
lapse of concentration.
Yeah, we didn't think the corner was that tight.
Yeah.
But Tanak was chasing, but it went on. Ogier started the last stage with a 6.2 second lead and had a puncture and lost by 0.2 of a second after 3 days. And they said the conditions, it was loose and there was rocks everywhere. It was quite a survival rally, but it sounds it for punctures, as often happens nowadays. He lost by 0.2 of a second. So Tanak in his first win of the year, I think.
Wow, The Pirelli guys are saying that the Scorpion tyre they used for the World Rally, they had an extra hard sidewall for Sardinia because it was it was really, really rough.
Steady Danny Sordo. Danny Sordo is a sort of what? The battery.
I was just going to say, it must be so annoying. Yeah, they do take it back. It must be so annoying when you that competitive, you're that good, and you stand out from everybody over the weekend, and then you get a puncture.
But Steady Danny Sordo, who's a part-time extra car for Hyundai, he's been a part-time extra car for years now. He was third, but he was 2.5 minutes. So the front two, by 0.2 of a second, was a 2.5 minute gap back to Sordo in third. Elfyn Evans got fourth. I think one of the fours, Munster, was fifth, and then I think sixth overall was a WCR2 car, because so much is the damage of the top teams. So spectacular, yes, but it's all on the watch. All you're doing is you watched Tanak coming through, the flying finish, sideways, dust everywhere, which is exciting to watch. But all you do is look at the clock. Will the clock stop? So that's always a problem. Isle of Man, the same. I mean, Joey, the whole story of the Isle of Man this week is, of course, Joey Dunlop tried to beat his father's record of 26. And on Saturday, equalled the record by winning the super sport race. And then yesterday in the super bike race, he was leading. It would have been a record-breaking win. And his visor, I think they changed them at the pit stop. So I see a lot of the pit stops, they get flies and muck. They don't have so many rip-offs. They quite often actually just pull the visor off and put a new one on when they stop for fuel. I'm not sure that's what actually happened. But he ended up parking at the side of the road in front of the fans, taking his helmet off and fixing his visor properly, and lost minutes. And so lost the chance of breaking the record yesterday. Peter Hickman winning it, by the way, just to put the story. No races today. So I don't know
what's the biggest one to win on over the weekend? It's the
Superbike one, I think, because that was the first Superbike round yesterday. And there's another I think the Superbike round finishes on Sunday, or the second Superbike race. There's lots. I'm not sure how many rides Joey's on. He's on Super Sports, Super Bikes, I don't know, so many classes. So
there's something on Twitter. Have a look at the Lovecars Twitter. There's a slow-mo Joey Dunlop going over the crest of the hill. He lands on the not straight. And so you're doing 170, 100, well, they say 190 at the time. So even a bit of artistic impression there. But you imagine landing not sideways at that sort of speed on two wheels. Oh, it just puts your heart in your mouth. Goodness knows what it must be like on riding the bike. It's bad enough watching.
Yeah, funnily, any of them tried to come do circuit race, and they're pretty much at the back. It's weird.
Weird.
They can't seem to mix it with the circuit boys. Because
those side carts as well.
I know, sidecars coming over. I think they just become specialists, because I think any circuit racer that goes off the Isle of Man can't be backs off the throttle everywhere. The commitment to these street races. Of course, the Ireland, they have actually racing, and they start with 10 bike grids in what's it called, the North Island.
I didn't know that.
All sorts. Oh yeah, they actually have races in Northern Ireland. Terrifying, down the Irish lanes. I mean, just terrifying. So the other mecca, of course, is the Nurburgring, for the Nürburgring 24 hours, which is a huge beer fest, sausage fest, drinking, watching cars.
Sausage fest. That's got an old. Another.
Well, they eat sausages, Frankfurters. I was thinking, only in your mind. That's typical of the modern world, you youngsters. You use a good old-fashioned word like
that.
You
love a sausage fest, don't you, Tiff?
Gets twisted and distorted.
Fest. Yes, you do.
So, but unfortunately, they didn't get 24 hours of drinking. Well, they got 24 hours of drinking, but they didn't get 24 hours of racing. Because it always happens. Well, it doesn't always happen over in fog this time. I don't have much rain, but they had fog, and they stopped the race just before midnight. Instead of the Nürburgring 24-hour race, it was the Nürburgring 7 hours and 22 minutes. Just before midnight, the fog was so bad they had to stop it. There had already been several huge shunts, as always. And they actually went out on Sunday, did 5 sort of parade laps, pretty much, safety car laps, to see if there was any possibility of anyone thought they could race, but they didn't. They never restarted. So it was a 7-hour, 22-minute race. Audi came out the winners. A Porsche team was second, and a BMW team was, one of the drivers was Britain's Dan Harper, came third. So again, I love it when it's a different manufacturer, the top 3 always, to show that
absolutely.
The competition is well worked out. So yeah, they're probably still there, some of the Nürburgring fans, still recovering the hangovers and eating more fried sausages or bratwursts. What's a bratwurst? Is that a sausage?
That's a sausage. You love a good sausage. Okay,
anyway,
NASCAR.
Of course, the NASCAR race, not a very good one. Glad you didn't watch it. You complained. It's on this very flat 1.5 mile or 1 1/3 mile gateway circuit. So it's sort of long straights but flat corners. So it's very much single line, hard to overtake. There was always some good racing, but there was a clash between the two Kyles, the great Kyle Larson. The Chevrolets weren't on the pace, but he had a bit of a clash going down the straight trying to get past Kyle Busch, who's always controversial. Having touched a couple of times, I think Larson didn't like it, so they went round turn 1 side by side, banging doors, then both end up in the wall. So that put them out. But it was pretty much a Ryan Blaney dominated the race in his Ford. His Penske, the Penske team, of course, do NASCAR as well as IndyCar as well as IMSA, do everything. And he was leading. I think, what was it? Who caught up? Well, I've written it down somewhere. Timothy Bell. Tim Bell caught him up. It was a bit of a dice, about 3 laps side by side, exciting dice near the end. And Bell's engine went sick. He went misfiring around to the finish line. In fact, at one stage, he got his teammate, Martin Truex Jr., to push him down the straights because his engine wasn't pulling full power or full revs, just to try and keep him going. But anyway, Blaney, with 1.5 laps to go, cruising to win, ran out of fuel. They don't know why. He pitted well within, there should have been plenty of fuel still on board. And so his teammate, Penske teammate, Austin Cedric, got his first win of the year. So happy for Penske, not the most exciting of races. And that ended our weekend around the world. There was obviously some great club racing here, there, and everywhere, but we are looking at international events. I can
so coming up next week. Well, actually, I'm going to see on Thursday at Thruxton. Interestingly, I just put a tweet on this morning asking for some help because I'm charging. We're coming to Thruxton.
You're towing with an electric car.
Towing, exactly, with an electric car, I know. But what are you supposed to do? Because I don't want to unhitch the bloody thing, unhitch this huge trailer. But likewise, you can't pull into a spot.
It's got a jockey wheel. It just takes a bit of time, you lazy
Okay,
git.
so if I do that, so it's not just the time, it's a security as well. Then you're parking it up and you're going in for a coffee. And then it's a security.
Come back, it's been nicked. Your trailer's gone.
Exactly. And the charging point on this particular car, I'm not going to say what the car is because that's fairly irrelevant, is on the back offside. So you can't even, because have they thought about this? I guess not. And I don't know whether I don't want to be contentious here, but we've had very few, normally if you put anything on Twitter about electric cars, you get all the electric lovey saying, "Wah, wah, wah, wah," and jumping down your throat saying, you don't know what you're talking about.
It's a nightmare.
Very quiet.
Reality is a nightmare. You see, we're going completely off the wall now. We're just about to talk about Grand Prix racing this weekend. The Isle of Wight ferry, they wanted to make new ferries. They wanted to buy electric ferries. But it works out that the power supply to Southampton, a fairly big city, hasn't got enough power to plug in to charge an Isle of Wight ferry. And the ferry only doesn't go that far, but the kilowatts, mega kilowatt, would just shut the system down. And this is what we talk about. When we've all got electric cars, the amount of it's not just the charging point infrastructure. You've got to rewire half of Britain to supply.
I've always said it's not the cars. It's not the cars. It's the infrastructure.
Anyway, next weekend, the Canadian Grand Prix. Will the Red Bull work? Will the curbs of Canada?
It's tight again. I hope it's tight again.
Will Jack Doohan be in an Alpine? Stories like that's what we want to hear. I think it's going to be really close. I think it's a great racing track. It's got that double DRS system. That the only way really DRS works is when you have a straight with DRS, a corner, another straight with DRS. So you've got the long straight down to the final chicane, then a short straight with DRS down to turn one. And spectacular wall climbing. Again, they come out those S's, don't they? Go up the little curve and touch the walls. Yeah. And these are the silly things that make you go, wow. You know, when a guy runs out over the curbs in Abu Dhabi or Kuwait and there's another acre of tarmac, you don't go, oh, blimey, that was nearly a what? Or nearly going onto a bit of tarmac. But when they come up a curb and they nearly kiss them, you go, whoa, God,
absolutely.
That's what racing should be about, an edge. The world needs an edge to it. Meanwhile, everything is in North America next weekend, everything, apart from BTC, which we'll talk about just at the end. Because the IndyCar and the NXT boys go to Road America, the greatest racetrack in the world, greatest road course, 4.5 miles of every type of corner, fast, flat out, grass verges, hardly any room for error, plenty of overtaking points. So that's for the IndyCars and the NXTs. But the NASCAR boys are on a road course. They do about 3 or 4 road courses. They're down in California at Sonoma, a road course. So everything's in North America. Apart from Thruxton BTCC, the best BTCC weekend is always at Thruxton with this fabulous flowing fast corners and fast circuit and overtaking getting harder and harder. The more, these BTC cars are becoming more scientific, cleverer, aero, little tweaks, little wings. You see them now coming through the fastest corner church and they just followed them. They don't even seem to be able to tow. There's nothing, but of course now they've got the more boost. So whereas the last couple of Thruxton races have been a bit processional, I'm hoping, and we're all hoping, that this extra boost button that's now, what is it? There's an extra 60 horsepower instead of an extra 30 that used to be, that will, because the leader, the championship leader, only has like 1 race lap of boost. And then, the second of the championship has 2, and they have to run these different I'm not sure what the tyre rules are for Thruxton. I should have researched that, because the other rounds, you have to have soft, medium, and hard. You have to run all 3 tyres in one of the 3 races. But Thruxton used to only have a single tyre because it's abrasive, hard-wearing nature. And I'm not sure what they're doing this weekend.
And so of course, we had the lovely Tom Ingram on our table at the BRDC golf thing as well. Very nice, very pleasant chat.
So Thruxton is definitely the place to go this weekend for a fabulous 2 days of entertainment. And it's just so much support races. Abby Pulling was doing well. I think she was quickest in testing. So can she get back to the front? Because she's been blown away by the boys recently in Formula 4. All sorts of stories to check out. Enjoy.
Good stuff. Enjoy. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next week. I'll see you on Thursday at Thruxton.
Cheers.
Cheers.